Today, we're diving into a really powerful idea from the book, The Hostage Effect. And it all starts with a single true story that is, frankly, harrowing. It's a case that pulls back the curtain on a dangerous truth, not just about being held captive, but about the invisible cages we sometimes build in our own minds. You know, this quote from Carl Jung just nails it. What he's getting at here is that there are these hidden forces that can steer our lives, and we'll just chalk it up to destiny or fate, when really we're just following a script we never even knew existed. This idea is at the very heart of the story we're about to get into. So, our story starts with the author, who used to be a detective, and there was this one case, from his time in the sexual assault and child abuse unit. It didn't just haunt him. It showed him this chilling blueprint for how control can become so normal that it's completely invisible. It all kicked off late on a Friday. You know, one of those calls that just changes everything. It was a junior detective he was mentoring, and he could hear the sheer shock in her voice before she even managed to get the words out. 2 boys are being kept in cages. I mean, just let those words sink in. This wasn't supposed to happen here, not in a quiet, rural community in Canada. He immediately turned his car around, his mind just racing, trying to process the cold, hard reality of what he just heard. And what they found? It was just a pit of despair, a basement that felt like it was carved out of shadows and rot. The conditions were absolutely horrific: dirt floors, jagged stone walls, and this deep chill that just seeped right into your bones. This was the world these 2 little boys had known for years. And the abuse, it wasn't random. It was methodical. It actually evolved over time. At first, the boys were tied up with ropes. But see, once they started school, rope burns would have raised alarms. So their captor, who was their own aunt, moved them into rusted dog kennels. Then, as they got bigger, she converted baby cribs into cages she could padlock shut. But here's the thing. The cages, they were only part of the story. This was never just about random violence. It was a sustained, deliberate system of psychological domination. It was designed from the ground up to create total submission. It was its own little culture of captivity. And the system was methodical. It was built on 4 pillars. First, you have isolation. No friends, very limited family contact. Second, indoctrination. They were only allowed to read a twisted version of the Bible that demanded obedience. Third, ritualization. Think daily inspections and punishments that just became routine. And finally, the most powerful one, normalizing, conditioning the boys to believe that this life was not only normal, but that they actually deserved it. And this is the most haunting part of the entire story. By the time the police found them, the boys were actually enforcing their own imprisonment. One of the boys would climb into his crib at night, put the lid on top, and lock himself in. Not because he was forced to anymore, but because he believed that's where he belonged. That heartbreaking image, that act of self-imprisonment, that is the absolute key to understanding the core idea here, what the author calls the hostage effect. It's that terrifying psychological jump where the victim starts to lock their own cage. So, the hostage effect isn't just about being held against your will. It's about what happens when that external control burrows its way inside and becomes an internal belief system. It's when you've been so completely conditioned that you start to enforce your own confinement because you believe it's normal, or necessary, or even that you deserve it. Let's just think about the difference for a second. Physical captivity, that's chains, bars, right? It needs constant supervision. But psychological captivity, that uses internalized rules. It creates this self-enforced obedience where the victim stops fighting the cage because they've been convinced, deep down, that they belong inside it. And that one case taught the author one of the most chilling lessons of his entire career. The captivity you can't see is by far the most dangerous. The kind that slowly conditions you to believe that obedience is a form of love, and that staying silent is what keeps you safe. Okay, so this is where the story explodes. It moves beyond that one dark basement and onto a much, much larger stage, our own society. The author makes a powerful case that what happened to those boys is a microcosm of a much larger truth about power, control, and even democracy. This is the question that really drove him to write the book. I mean, think about it. If 2 children surrounded by a society that prides itself on being civilized could be silenced so completely, what does that say about the invisible cages we might be living in without even knowing it? When you look at society, the hostage effect starts to play out when, say, leaders prioritize their own interests over the public's, or when rules are bent so gradually, so slowly, that we barely notice. These systems of power thrive on our submission, on us just accepting the stories we're fed, until we start to believe the system is just too big and powerful to ever change. That feeling of powerlessness, that's the goal. And the ultimate endgame of this kind of control is to make it so pervasive, so normal, that it just becomes invisible. The most dangerous illusion of all is being so conditioned that you believe there were never any walls in the first place. You end up mistaking your cage for the entire world. But look, this isn't a story without hope. Not at all. The author's whole point is that there is a way out. And the first, most critical step to escaping any psychological cage is simply recognizing that you're in one. Just as the author writes, this state of mind doesn't have to be a life sentence. It only defines us if we let it. That feeling of powerlessness is just an illusion. We always have our own agency, our ability to see what's happening, to question it, and to stand up. So how do we actually do it? Well, first we have to recognize the chains, start to see the subtle forces of manipulation that are all around us. Second, we have to actively reclaim our own agency and remember our power to think for ourselves. And third, we have to demand accountability, because these systems of power, they only work if we allow them to. And that brings us to the final, and maybe the most important thought here. This story isn't just about two boys in a basement, or some abstract political idea. It's about us. So the question to leave you with is this: what cages, what invisible walls, and quiet rules have you stopped noticing in your own life?